Work on this computer. All right, so we are now recording. So greetings, everyone. I am Siobhan, the founder of Be Free Project, the host of the Girl Be Free podcast, as well as the author of the Motherless Child Guidebook. Like, woohoo! So thank you so much for everyone that has invested in the Motherless Child Guidebook, a sacred space for healing your mother wounds. Totally, like, I don't even know what words I can use to describe like how I feel about creating this body of work. And then having women who have been dealing with their own mother wounds now raising their hand like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this resource. This is exactly what I needed. And I didn't even know that I needed it. And so I am honored and overly grateful for you, not standing up for yourself, but choosing yourself and making yourself first and making your healing a priority. Like that is like I tip my hat off to you because this is not easy work. I've shared, if you've watched the videos, I've shared like my story and how I got started with all of this and where I'm at today. And I'm just like, wow, like I'm still blown away that like this is a thing, because I think I shared this on social media like a few days ago. Like this was not in the plan for 2019 at all. This was not in the plan. And so to now have this work that I'm very proud of. Like, I'm just grateful for everyone who's showed up for themselves. So, as you know, that's who I am. So, Linda, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Linda Mallory. I'm a blogger and author at A Life with a View. And I've been following Siobhan for like 5+ years. So when I heard about the Motherless Child podcast, that's when I listened to it. I was like, wow. And then I just started seeing it blow up on social media. I mean, it really, really spoke to me. And when going through the guidebook, I think you listed 7 or 8, factors of the being a mother's child, whether it's emotional or physically not being there. And I shared that what spoke to me, which was the emotional, unattachment of my mom. So it was really, really good. I just recently had a chance to go through it since I was getting my son off to college and my daughter starting middle school. So I'm really glad that I sat down and actually took the time to go through it and actually took some notes. Just on pieces of paper. I haven't printed out the guidebook yet, but I do plan to do that in the very near future. So, I love your work, huge fan, all that. So,
I do. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
And the people that, follow you and the people that follow you, we all know, how wonderful you are, and just really appreciate you creating this resource for us. Because for a while, me personally, I kind of ran from it for years, and now it's like, raising my own children. My son is 18, my daughter's 11, so they're at those critical ages. I've always went over, above, and beyond to be there for my children. So yeah.
And really, that's really so good that, I didn't know, like with the Motherless Child episode, like I had no idea, like the magnitude. Like I honestly had a moment on Mother's Day that I was like, whoa, like, and I didn't even know that I could still be triggered in certain ways. And so after that situation had happened, I felt like I just felt like I had to share something, like I had to, I don't know, like share my experience. And I didn't even know, like, there were so many people that were connected to me and that were following me that also had mother wounds. And I talk about it like here and there, but not at length as I'm doing now. Obviously because I have the guidebook and I've talked about it in the podcast, but I had no idea. And so when I did that episode, like my DMs were like flooded with people like from all over the world, thanking me for, sharing that. It was very touchy. One lady actually emailed me and she said, I couldn't even listen to it in its entirety because I was crying, because you were touching on everything that I was experiencing. And she was like, and I wasn't ready to deal. And I'm like, well, take your time. There's no rush.
Yeah.
The episode will be there. And then even in my DMs, like people were sending me like paragraphs among paragraphs of like all of their story. And I'm like, wow. And so after that episode was released, I then felt like, okay, I can't just leave people with like this podcast. Like I felt like I at least need to share what I know to be true and what has helped me through therapy and doing my own self-discovery work. Like I felt like a responsibility. And that's what I keep saying. Like I felt a responsibility to make space for women who are hurting. And there's so many that are. And there was this one lady who reached out to me and she said, I want to invest in the Motherless Child Guidebook. However, I'm so busy with work and all these things that I'm doing. And I'm like, that can just be like a defense mechanism, right? Like, because you can get so sucked into your work. And I know very well what that looks like. And you let that be your focus but that mother wound is always going to be there. Like it will show up in so many different ways. Like, and I talk about it in the guidebook, like in your relationships, and that can be platonic and romantic, and even how you parent your children. Like it will show up if you don't start to heal. Like, have you seen that in your own life, Linda? And you can share.
Oh yeah,
Galaxy.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're reminders that kind of pop up, and I think what I do to I was like the woman you described, or the person you described, kind of avoiding it for a long time. So I would try to overcompensate it to make sure I didn't do certain things, or I didn't say certain things to my children. I may have overdone it in some ways, but then other ways it kind of smoothed itself out. So for me, it was more of the avoidance, but like you said, a key thing you said about it showing up in different areas. So, and because I didn't address it or wouldn't go back and address certain things, it showed up like right before my son graduated from high school. Because I was, upset about my mom, choosing her religion over coming to my son's prom send-off. Yeah. So that triggered something. So I was like, and it was right around the time of the release when you came out with the podcast. So I just felt that emotion kind of spike. And it just, it wasn't a good feeling. So when I saw this, I was like, I've got to invest. I got to talk about it. It has to be, something at the forefront for me.
And you know what? I've been listening to a lot of Brene Brown, and we talked about Brene Brown at the Be Free Inner Circle, like watching her live or her talk on Netflix, and I've been like really working through like the shame part, like, and let me know too. And I'm just gonna go with Galaxy since you prefer to be anonymous. But let me know if you felt this, because I know for me personally, I carried a lot of shame, very embarrassed by my situation with my mother. And even to this day, like, and I just had this epiphany, like a couple of weeks, last week, not a couple of weeks, I'm trying to extend it. Last week, where I was like, there's still something there. Because when she requested me as a friend on Facebook, the day one when I was going live to promote the guidebook and everything, I was triggered. And then, like, if you would see my mother today, like, you know how sometimes people can just look like life has hit them hard?
Yes.
And that's exactly what that's what I see. And so I've been processing through that. Like, well, what does that feel like? Why are you triggered? Why are you feeling like the way that you feel? And I think it's really important to, when you are triggered, to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling some type of emotion, whether it's shame, whether it's you're feeling vulnerable, whether you're feeling angry, pissed off, whatever, like, why is that coming up? And okay, good. Okay, yeah, she said I can call her Anna. Okay, Anna, perfect. Yeah, I didn't like calling you Galaxy anyway. I'm like, that is not okay. But yes, that will work. But I had to deal with those emotions. And so now that I am aware of the emotions, because I too am working through the guidebook, it's like, okay, why do you feel like that? Why is that coming up? And then what are you willing to do to kind of heal from that, right? Hello, can you hear and see me okay? Can you hear me? Yes, no? Maybe. Okay. So I'm processing myself. I'm processing through that as well. I think, is it Yolanda? I think it says Yolanda. Let me know if you can hear and see me okay. And then Anna, let me know as it relates to shame, or any emotion that came up, or if you felt triggered while going through the Motherless Child Guidebook. So I kind of want to start. I have a couple of questions, because you know me, I have to ask questions, right? And then also I shared on my social media platform, as well as, where else did I share? Social media and where? Oh, in the newsletter that I send out, that
Mhm.
I am collaborating with Dr. Joy from Therapy
Yeah.
for Black Girls, which I'm really
Mhm.
excited about that. And so next Wednesday, her and I are going to do a Zoom, and we're going to
Mhm.
pre-record it. And so whoever sends me questions in, I can ask a therapist, because I am not. Because someone asked me that somewhere, and I'm like, no, I am not a licensed
Yeah.
therapist by any stretch of the imagination. I am sharing all from experience, right?
Mhm.
However, I wanted to have a profession. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm on mute just in case. Um, but I wanted a licensed professional
Mhm.
therapist that can that can answer any questions that go beyond beyond what I can answer. Because I'm only basing this off my experience from me going through therapy and sharing from that perspective. But if you have something specific that you want a therapist to answer when it relates to unhealthy mother-daughter relationships or mother wounds and all that, send those questions in to me, because her and I will chat next week, and then I'll be sharing that conversation on my platform, and she's going to do the same on hers.
That'd be great.
So I think that can keep the conversation going, because again, there's so many people that are trying to work through this, and I just want to kind of let people know that there is a resource, and not only me providing what I can, have to offer, but then also her as a licensed professional or a licensed
Right.
therapist, she can do the same. So my first question for anyone who's watching me live here, if you want to talk, all you have to do is unmute yourself. So you go in the bottom left corner. Is that how it goes, Linda? In the bottom
I
left?
think so. Yeah, it is. Let me see. Uh, I'm on my phone, so yeah, it is the bottom left. Yes,
Okay, because
yes,
that's what it
yep.
shows for me. So
Okay,
if
yep.
you want to if you want to unmute yourself and talk, you just hit the mute or unmute at the bottom left corner. And then if you want to show your face, which is totally fine if you want to, if not, that's cool as well. You just hit start video, and then everyone can see everyone. If you prefer to use a chat, that's amazing as well. All you have to do is type in the chat box that you'll see to the right. I don't know, do you have to press something? Oh yeah, in the bottom bar, you'll see like
Yeah,
a little
it's
chat bubble.
bottom. Yep.
And then if
Mhm.
you hit that, then we can chat. So I'm kind of paying attention to all of this. I am recording it, so then that way, anyone who couldn't join us live tonight, they'll be able to catch the replay. So that is that. So be thinking, if you do have questions for Dr. Joy from Therapy for Black Girls, be thinking of any questions, because I need them by tomorrow.
Okay.
So that way I can ask her that. So my first question to everyone who's watching me or chatting with me is, were you able to see your mother in one of the 8 patterns? So I know for me, I know I shared this in one of the videos that you received, is that my mother was emotionally and mentally unavailable. Um, from I, from far as I can remember, when I was a little girl, but it probably long before that. It's just, we never had a bond, we never had a connection. There was always this disconnect, and it still is to this day. But that's the pattern that she falls into, and it's probably another one too, that because it can be an overlap, as like I said in
Mhm.
the videos, where I feel like mothers can be multiple different patterns. So let me know, Linda, Yolanda, and then Anna in the chat, and whoever else is listening, what were you able to see your mother in one of the 8 patterns? And anybody can go first, it's fine.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I definitely saw my mom in the 3rd pattern, and I think when I was reading the guidebook, you said you could see your mom in multiple. You may see her in multiple areas.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the one that stuck out for me. And I think when I was reading too, you had mentioned that, or maybe this is one of the videos, that it could have been something from her past, or how she was raised, or how and I think that did have a lot to do with it. My grandmother wasn't very nice to my mom, and so she wasn't mothered well, so that got passed down to my mom. And so my mom, when she had us, when her and my dad were married, they had us, they later divorced. I just don't think she ever had that motherly connection, and she just didn't know how to do it and also have that. And she didn't really have her independence either.
Mm-hmm.
So after my parents divorced, we moved to Maryland and lived with my grandmother for 6 years. Her mother really never lived on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, you know, met a guy at church, married him, and they've been married for the last now 30 years. So she never had that kind of independence. And see, me, I saw that and I went in a completely different direction because I knew that wasn't the direction that I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
So she was emotionally unavailable and very attached to, you know, her religions. I think she feels that is going to make the mend happen with my sister and I. And she's just, you know, she's been married to my stepfather now for almost 30 years. So that is kind of her life and how that is. And she hasn't really made the connection with my kids, her grandkids. So my son and my daughter, which now is starting to rear a little bit of its head, because now that Miles is off to college, I think she's kind of waking up like, wow, he really did grow up fast. And so now she's starting to see, because I'm a very hands-on mom. I'm always there. I'm in my kids' lives. So I said I'm going to make sure that I'm emotionally available for my kids. So that's where I mostly saw her show up.
And I want to keep re-emphasizing that point that you just made as it relates to, and I said this in the videos too, like our mothers are mothering based on how they were mothered. Yes. So if their mother didn't give them everything that they need, and it's not to take away anything from anybody, you know, or to fault anyone, but if they didn't get what they needed as a child, how the heck were they supposed to mother you? They're only going to do it based on their experiences, unless something shifts, right? There's some type of where they say, you know, I don't want to repeat what my mother did, so I'm going to do the exact opposite. But that can go to one extreme, or they can never do anything in the first place, and then they think that they're being better, but yet they're repeating those same patterns over and over again. Yeah. And unless you are, and this was the last podcast that I did last week, was you have to be the person that's going to break the generational trauma. Like you have to be that person. Otherwise, you will pass on those patterns that you don't like. You will pass them right over to your child or your children, even though it made you very unhappy.
Yeah.
Anna, would you like to share in the chat box your as it relates to where you see your mother following in the 8 patterns, or where does she fall? And then Yolanda, can you hear me or see me okay? I don't know if I can. And then, let's see. And then 906.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, I can hear you. Who is that? Tell me.
It's Yolanda. I don't know how to work this.
Oh, you're on 2? Okay, so are you the area code? Does your number end in 9330?
Yeah.
So I think you're on here twice, which is totally fine. Well, now I can see you.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? I saw you before.
I'm good.
And
yes, I was trying to, I could see you, but I couldn't hear you.
Gotcha. Well, welcome. I'm so glad I can see your face. So where would you say your mom falls when it comes to the 8 toxic mother patterns?
I saw my mom in quite a few. I would say the emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, definitely. And I forget which one it was, but it's the one where it's like all about her. Everything has to be about her. It's always about her. The whole show, everything.
Competitive mom?
Yeah. Yeah. Not really competitive though. Like she just, it's nothing wrong with her. It's everybody else.
Oh, well, that's a narcissistic mom.
Yes. So I saw her mostly in that one and emotionally unavailable.
Now, let me ask, when you were reading through the different patterns, was it hard to choose 1 or 2, or were you able to see right away, like, that is my mother, like, that is her?
I saw right away. I saw right away, like, that's her. Like I said, I did see her in a couple of them, but mainly it was the narcissistic that was like head on for me. I know one thing that stood out for me that I did want to say to you, Siobhan. One of my biggest struggles with dealing with my mother's wounds is, you know, the whole piece where you were talking about how don't let people make you feel guilty. for not dealing with your mother, or, you know, having the relationship that everyone thinks you're supposed to have or should be able to have with your mother. A lot of people guilt trip me, like, you know, you haven't talked to your mom, you know, you only get one mother, you know, and as true as that is, sometimes it's not as easy to, you know, talk to your mother or deal with these issues. So that definitely resonated with me, the whole piece, like sometimes you have to love them from a distance, because that's basically where I am right now. And I'm definitely, you know, hearing a lot from people that, you know, well, you should call her. And I've done all that. I've tried to break the ice. I've, you know, tried to be the bigger person. I've tried, you know, and it just, right now, I feel like this is the best space for us. You know?
You know what, Yolanda? I totally know that. Like, people have said that to me as well, or maybe in different ways. And if you have never walked in my shoes, you cannot tell me what to do. You cannot tell me how to love her from a distance or how close I need to be. If you don't know what it feels like to have this toxic relationship, there's no way that you can tell me what I should do. And I carry guilt forever, like thinking like, oh, you know, the Bible says honor your mother and your father.
Yes.
I am hurting here.
Yes.
I have this pain that I've been carrying that she has not addressed or acknowledged or anything. And yet I'm supposed to still be normal, like everything is okay. Absolutely not. And I had someone in my DMs too. She was like, I mean, her story. I mean, and we all have our own stories, but I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. And she said, am I still supposed to be, you know, close with her, or is it okay if we just don't talk? I said, well, that's for you to decide. I said, for me, it just works best that we love each other from a distance, and that's totally fine. And I've come to peace with that. So then if someone says, oh, you should do this, no, you can't tell me. You cannot. And you can have your opinion, but that has nothing to do with me, because you don't know what it feels like. I do want to ask, and then I'm going to read Anna's response. Has anyone went to therapy?
Yes, I'm actually in therapy, thanks to you. Yes, yes, you gave me an awesome referral. So yes, I am in therapy, dealing with that. And then your guidebook came right on time. So, and I actually ordered 2 of the books so far. I have like a whole cart in Amazon right now. But I ordered 2 of the books, and I just started reading today. What's it called? The red one. How to Love Your Mother.
And I
have, that one.
I'm surprised I don't have it right by my side. But yes, I know. And that's the one that I use because the group that I went to, it was called Healing the Mother Wounds. And that is the book that we use for our whole therapy session. And that one was really, really helpful. And I used that one along with all of the other ones as a resource as I was creating the content for the Motherless Child Guidebook. So I'm glad to know that you're in therapy, because I feel like the Motherless Child Guidebook is perfect whether you've never been to therapy before, or it'll be a great resource as you're going through therapy, right? So I think it can serve, or if you've been to therapy and you're not using anything, like, I think it will work either way on how you use it. So I'm glad. Let me read Anna's response. She says, yes, I see the toxic mother patterns. Number 1, dismissive. And actually, I can use that one too, because I think my mother falls in that category as being dismissive. Narcissistic, controlling, and a little bit of number 8, number 8 was emotionally and verbally abusive. And you know what's interesting with the emotional and verbal abusive, that one almost didn't get added in there. I was having a conversation with a friend, and I sent her the guidebook. I'm like, I just want you to read through it all and give me your feedback. And she said, you know, everything that you touched on when it came to actually, I had just sent her the patterns. And she said, everything that you touched on was right on point. You're just missing one. And I'm like, well, what am I missing? And she was like, the emotional and verbal abusive mom. And so she started sharing her story with me. And I'm like, wow. And as soon as she said it, it reminded me of the movie Precious. How the mother was so verbally and emotionally and physically abusive to the daughter. And I'm like, wow, there's so many women that can experience that. So I went and did my research and added that. And she's like, now it's complete. And so thank you so much for sharing that, Anna, because there are many women who mothers talk very down to them, you know, and know how to manipulate them and make them feel insecure and, you know, unloved based on how they communicate with them. So thank you for sharing that. she also says, I'm also in therapy. Since coming across the guidebook, I'm wanting to focus more on mother wounds because I now realize how much the wounds affect me. Yeah, they are very deep. And I don't think everyone, I don't know if people really realize how deep they are, you know, like, and how they affect like all of these different areas of your life. Linda, have you been to therapy, or are you in therapy?
No, I'm not. No, when my father passed away in 2010, I went to grief counseling, but I haven't done like formal therapy before. And I was like, wow. So I was, in terms of thinking about the questions for Dr. Joy, I was like, wow, maybe I was thinking about it, but I've always been a little shy about therapy. And I think I'm now like one of the few that is not in therapy amongst like friends and inner circle folks. So I do want to take that step. So yeah, I do want to.
And I know, like, when I first went, my first therapist was not, well, I can't say she wasn't a good fit, but the timing just wasn't right. And I was sharing my story, and I was with her for like maybe 3 sessions. And I just felt like all I was doing was talking. I didn't get anything. Like, I'm very actionable. So I need you to give me some homework so I can work through this stuff. And then at the time, my best friend was getting married. And so I think my mind was probably consumed with that, being a maid of honor and all that jazz, that, I probably didn't give it my all. And so when I went back after maybe several months, because I still was dealing with the issues, like healing the mother wounds, like changed my life. And I know I talked about it in one of those videos. I know it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So my next question for you guys is, how have you felt working through the Motherless Child Guidebook? Like, so has anyone completed it? I don't expect you to complete it.
No,
Good, because I don't.
Not yet. No.
But however far, like, how do you feel working through it, or even flipping through it, or even watching the videos, or looking at the bonus materials? Like, how have you felt thus far going through the material? Like, yeah, that's my first question.
I think acknowledging it for me, I felt good. I'm sorry, Yolanda. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Linda. Nope, go ahead.
No, I felt that, going through the Motherless Child Guidebook, I felt like that was the first step for me, acknowledging it. So I was like, wow, that was huge for me. So I felt good. I actually, flipped through it a couple times just to really read through those 8 factors and, where, I also looked at it from my mother's standpoint, but also looked at it to see if I may be exhibiting some of those behaviors.
That part.
So that was it for me. So going through that and making sure and doing the work, as you always say, I think that was key. So yeah, I'm definitely, going to start, doing the pages and really looking at it. So those were just a couple of things that immediate takeaways is what I would say.
Okay, thank you. And I will point out when I sent the guidebook to my coach, she was like, well, I don't have any mother wounds per se. She said, I don't have anything. She was like, but I was reading it from 2 perspectives. And she said, one perspective was I had to make sure that I wasn't any of these toxic patterns and that they were showing up as I'm raising my child.
Exactly.
And I was like, I'm so glad that you said that, because I too was looking like, wait, well, let me make sure. And, and obviously we all have faults, right? None of us are perfect. And so we're not going to be the perfect parents or what have you. However, like you said, Linda, the goal is that you acknowledge, right? So that you acknowledge where your mother is and how the relationship is unhealthy. And then you also acknowledge how you can be a better mother, friend, guardian, what have you, as you look at these different patterns. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Yolanda?
Absolutely. I agree with that. Same for me. I was looking at the different descriptions and trying to see if there was anything in me. And I have picked up some of my mother's patterns. I don't believe it's to that degree, but it's funny. I can definitely relate to you as well, Siobhan, when you were saying, you focus so hard on trying not to be them, and then you end up still picking up, some of those behaviors. And that was me constantly saying to myself that I would be nothing like her. Although I do know that there's some things that I did pick up, that I did want to. But I do acknowledge it, and I am, like I said, in therapy for it. And this book definitely is helping me work through those issues. And, if it may be affecting my marriage or anything, it comes out in other ways. So,
sure does. Yeah.
So I just think it's awesome that you did this book. This is definitely a topic that a lot of people don't touch on. So I think it was definitely needed. I thank you for it. It came right on time for me.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah.
And one thing I do want to point out too, and I posted this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, so often you hear about father issues, or the dad, whatever that situation looks like. So often you hear about it, but nobody talks about mama. Like nobody. It's almost like there's this sense of entitlement where whatever she does is what she does, and we're just gonna let it be. And now I am opening up the conversation, like not no more. Like that's not okay. Like not. And this was my whole intent around even creating this guidebook. Like I don't want my mother to look bad. I don't want to blame her. I almost want to protect her in a sense. However, like all of us, we have a story, and I don't think that it's fair for us to suffer with whatever they passed on and not deal with it because we want to make them feel comfortable, and yet they're not doing any healing or anything on their own. So Anna says it's an eye-opener going through the book. Like you've mentioned, so many of these things we've normalized. Absolutely. When you look at them and realize what has been happening, you see that those things are not normal and not okay. Absolutely. Yeah, that is, you are right on the money with that one. My next question is, how did you know this was something you needed? So how did you know the Motherless Child Guidebook was something that you needed at this moment? Like, what did you feel internally that you knew, like, oh, I need it,
Well, for me, I'm in therapy, so I'm dealing with these issues. So, like I said, for me, it just came right on time, like with what I was already working on.
So so let's go back before you started going to therapy. Was there something that triggered you? Was there something that you knew, like, oh man, like I know this is because of my relationship with my mother that I need to go to therapy? Like what were you going through emotionally where you knew you had to do something?
Well, for me, I almost had a breakdown. Like I don't know what it was that specifically triggered it, but I just knew something needed to be done, and I wasn't able to do it on my own anymore. I didn't know what that something was, and then I ended up going to a conference, a women's conference, and I saw you.
Wait, what conference was it?
The Woman's How Much Are You Worth?
Oh, yes. I spoke there. Oh, I was so tired after speaking there.
You did speak there. So when you spoke there, that was like, it was, everything just, it literally lined up. Like, it was like I was going through something and I didn't know what it was. And then I went to your class and it was just like, you talked about therapy and I have been considering it, but I didn't know where to go, where to start. And so it started really for me there at that moment.
Yeah. That was almost a year ago because it was in November of last year. Such a great experience. Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm glad when you put everything, because I'm like, wait, where was I speaking at? You know how you're so many different places or whatever, you can't remember what's going on. Okay, I remember exactly. Totally.
Yes.
Okay. And then what about you, Linda? And then you
yeah, so for me, I mean, I didn't know I needed it until I needed it, I guess. So I think with all the transitions of, with my son going off to college, my daughter starting middle school, we've just been going through a lot of changes, and it kind of highlighted some other areas that needed work. And that was it for me. And I think, and I know, people cancel on things all the time. But I think I was really upset that my mom didn't come to my son's prom send-off, because you do that once in life, right? For most people. And that to me was a big deal. And I said, am I being super sensitive because he's graduating from high school, he's getting ready to go to college, he's doing this basketball thing? Am I just being, I said, no, I'm not going to dismiss it as me being too sensitive. This is the issue. This is what it is. So less than a week later, or it was right around the same time, that's when this came out. And I said, okay, this is it. I said, it's got to be. And so listening to the podcast, all the conversations around it on social media and in the inner circle, that's when I knew at that moment that this is what I needed.
That makes sense. Thank you. Anna says, when I heard your podcast on mother wounds and hearing you promote the book made me realize I needed it because it's a topic that's not spoken about enough. After hearing you talk about it, made me feel like, wow, I'm not alone. Other women are going through this as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was one of the things that kept coming up in my DMs is that now they didn't feel alone or something was wrong with them because they have a strained relationship with their mother. Or also like, and what really did, and I talked about this on the podcast, this Mother's Day, I just feel like there was so many posts around women who didn't have relationships with their mother. And I feel like it was more than I've ever seen it. Because it's almost like you just see these happy, posts like, oh, my mother, love, 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 all that jazz. But this year, it just seemed like there was a lot of compassion and empathy for women who didn't have relationships with their mother. And that is also what triggered me to do the episode. Because I'm like, I'm glad somebody else is saying something. I need to say something too. And so to your point, Anna, there are a lot of people that feel like they're the only ones dealing with what, they're the only ones that have that strained relationship. And it's not the case. And I know because in my DMs, I copied like all of these responses that women have sent me. And I have 7 pages of stories from women that are complete strangers to me for the most part. And so with that, I'm like, wow. So I'm just like, this is just the beginning of, getting the word out about it. This is something that's going to constantly be talked about because there's so many women hurting and they're hiding behind their pain. And even with the women that when I would go and look at their Instagram feeds, I'm like, oh, well, she just shared this story. Let me go see what she looked like. The most beautiful women taking all the selfies, going, you would not even know just by looking at their picture, these very painful stories that they had just shared. So that just goes to show you that we need to have more conversation. We need to get the word out about it because there are women who need to heal, just like we do, right?
Yep.
My next question is, how has your mother wound showed up in your life? So Linda, I know you talked about like, most recently with your son going off to prom and your mom not being present, and then also her growing up and then remarrying and all that jazz. Is there other ways that your mother wounds have showed up in your life that you're now realizing?
I think I realized it a while ago, sometimes being, too tentative with some things and not taking chances out of fear. And I think that was and that has happened, or it's been happening over time. I'm slowly, working through that and getting over that because I don't want to be like that, not taking chances. And my mom would sometimes say to me, why are you driving to Tyson's Corner, Virginia? You that's just too far. And I'm like, I'm not going to live life afraid. And, my mom hates to drive. She wants to be picked up all the time. And, I'm like, I'm not going to live like that. I have things to do. I have life to experience. So I've had to, fight hard to not be that way. Yeah. And so that's where it has shown up. From all the way from when I got my driver's license in my early 20s, all the way up to now. I just did not want to be like that having that tentative spirit and then trying to control it at the same time. So I'm like, I'm just not going to do that.
Right. And it would drive you crazy. It would drive you crazy.
Yeah, it's driving her crazy. I know it is. Because I say stuff to her sometimes like, Ma, you got to get out. You got to do stuff. You just can't sit here. And I've also tried to encourage my mom to go to therapy. We talked about my grandmother, when she was living and everything, and just her own mother wounds, so to speak. And I was like, you need to go to therapy. She said, well, I'm in my 70s. I'm not doing that. And I have my religion. I said, okay, that's all great and good. However, this, I think I'm not a therapist, but maybe this would be one of my questions for your.
Oh, but, what is it? So I can write it down.
Get somebody to go to therapy and they don't think they need to go.
You can't get them to go if they look at me. I got the answer. But I will ask that.
It's just stuff like that I've had to fight against that, and I think I've done okay. But just making sure that I'm not passing that on, to my children.
And when you speak about therapy, like that generation is like,
Mm-hmm.
I love now that there's so much conversation around therapy. From the podcast that I listen to, influencers that I follow. I mean, even with the platform Therapy for Black Girls, I'm like, that is so cool, right? And so I'm hearing more conversation, which is really, really great. And people being open to say, yeah, I go see someone and not feeling judged about it, right? And knowing like, I'm doing it because this is what works for me. I think the generation before us, it's just, like even when I told my grandmother I was in therapy, what you gotta do that for? You can pray or you can talk to me. And I'm like, no, I cannot. I need professional advice on how to really, get out of my feelings with all of this stuff. So, but I will ask that question. So thank you for that.
Okay, great.
Anna, you can share your response in the chat. The question was, how has your mother wound showed up in your life? And then Yolanda, you can respond.
I think my mother wounds they've shown up with me and my kids. Like I said, I think my mother used to, I remember her always yelling. Like it was a lot of yelling. Her patience was always short. So I started noticing that I was also short, and that, you had to get your message across by yelling. So they showed up, of course, with me raising my kids. They also showed up in my marriage. My husband said to me that I'm not as affectionate sometimes, and he believes that's because my mother wasn't that affectionate to me. So it's shown up in my marriage and my with my kids.
And that's something too, because my mother wasn't affectionate. I cannot ever remember getting a hug, no sign of anything, but I am affectionate, right? So it's like you can either go from one extreme and repeat that, or you can change it. But then that's just in one area. Obviously, I'm sure that there's other areas in my life where, and one thing that I know for sure that I do, like my mother, because there was no affection, she would be in one room and I would be in another. And it was completely normal for us to go hours without saying anything other than if she was leaving or something like that. And so I have to be mindful of that now. Like, yes, of course, it's nice to have your solitude, but not doing it as a way of repeating that behavior that you grew up around. And that's something that I have to be conscious about it, because I'm so used to just being alone. And I'm an only child. So it was easy for her to just, go out, resort to wherever she was, and I would be in my own space, and we would never have to communicate with each other when I was staying with her. So it's the beautiful thing about all of this is to be aware, right? To be aware of how these patterns are showing up, these behaviors, and then kind of working backwards. And I don't want to use the word fix, but just to do something different, right? And I don't know if I've said this in any of the videos or whatever, but I say this a lot in the Be Free Inner Circle when I talk on social media, is to give yourself grace, and not to rush the process, because I've been on this journey for over 17 years. And I started my mother made her choice when I was 15 years old. I've been on this particular journey for 7 years with like the counseling and all that jazz. And so it takes time. And then there will be other things that come up and you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was an issue. That's something else I have to work on. Or once you think you're good, then there will be another trigger. And you're like, oh, this is another part that I have to kind of heal through. Anna said, one of my biggest mother wounds that has affected me as an adult is losing my voice. Oh yeah, I was always silenced as a child, and that always made it hard for me to speak up for myself, because I was always made to feel that my voice wasn't meant to be heard. That's something I still struggle with today. Did I talk about that in the podcast? I feel like I talked about that.
About the voice?
You did.
I'm like, that's because I know that so well. Anna, my mother stole my journal when I was 14 years old, and she punished me for what I had written in my journal, and that was when I lost my voice. And it took, and I'm still working through this, but I'm much better than I used to be, where it was hard for me to communicate how I really felt, or I would silence myself because I always wanted to avoid conflict or confrontation. So if someone had a problem with me, or someone had a problem, like I would just keep my feelings inside and allow them to say whatever, and then allow them to pass and keep it moving, because I didn't have my own voice. And it wasn't until I went to therapy, and the first thing she said was that you have a right to express yourself however you choose to, as long as you're not hurting anyone and you're not intentionally trying to hurt anyone or say anything cruel or mean. Like, you have a right to use your voice. And it took some time, because when you're someone that has lost your voice, it's almost like you have all of these thoughts in your head of what you want to say, but they won't come out no matter what. They will not come out. And so it's like, it's work. It's almost like you have to go against your brain and like force yourself to say things, even when it's uncomfortable. So I know what that feels like, very much so.
Yeah.
Can you ladies relate to that?
Definitely. Yep.
I can also relate to the migraines.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah, it was funny because I had a Mother's Day a few years ago, and there was a very heated situation with my mom, and I had an immediate migraine right afterwards. Vomiting, dizzy, all of that. And it lasted for hours, but there was so much emotion before the migraine, that was all around my mother. It had resulted from what had happened with my mother on Mother's Day. And so when you talked about the migraines, I had never had issues with migraines. And then our relationship has always been up and down, but it kind of really took a turn for the worse, like in maybe 2014. And I started having migraines really bad in 2014. So I thought that was interesting. I actually shared that with my husband. Like, Siobhan talked about having migraines and how a guy told her, you need to fix the relationship with your mother. I thought that was so interesting.
Oh, my God.
When I definitely...
It blew my mind.
That was interesting.
Seen that guy a day in my life. And when he said that, I literally just started bawling, crying, like, who is this? Like, why did he say that? And I had no idea what to do with it at the time, because I was in my early 20s, so I didn't know. Therapy wasn't like a conversation or anything like that. And even when I went to therapy, my therapist told me that my migraines are tied to my mother wounds. And as I've been doing this work, I did get one today. And I was interested. And I wonder, and now I'm going to have to go back and journal about this. But this morning when I woke up, I was completely fine. And then when I started drinking my coffee, I get the blurriness in my vision. And all of that. However, I was able to lay down and go to sleep for maybe, I don't know how long I was asleep, but not too long. And then the headache subsided, where I never had to take anything. Now that is a new experience. And I did tap. So if you do some research on it, there's certain parts of your body that you can tap. And there's videos on on YouTube as well. But I started tapping my head, and then I went to sleep. And then when I woke up, it subsided, and I never had to take anything. But that was the first time in a long time that I've got one. But they used to be extremely severe, where I would be in a hospital. Even the medication that they gave me wasn't enough, and I would have to get shots so that it can go immediately into my blood or bloodline or bloodstream or what have you. But I just praise God now that even today, it was 30 minutes if it was that, it wasn't long at all. And I was perfectly fine, and I'm able to still function. But before, complete darkness, the medication, the blurriness of the vision, the nausea, all of that. Absolutely horrible. So when people say they got a migraine, and you're like, if you could sit here and talk to me, you don't know.
You ain't got no migraine. You do not have a migraine.
Not at all. So I would do some research on that, especially if it was, you said like there was some emotion that came up first and then the migraine was triggered, and even talk to your therapist about that as well, to see if there's any, relation to that. Cause I know that was what it was for me. And I just wonder with this, I don't know, I'm gonna have to dig deep. I'm gonna have to figure out why would that happen this morning.
Wow.
Anna says, I believe I've heard you speak on this before. I've had a similar experience where my mother took my journal as well, and she even wrote an angry message back to me in the journal. I'm an only child as well. Well, our stories are very similar, Anna. My mother didn't write a message back, but she definitely kept it, and she kept it for a long time, like that day, like hours, and then she punished me for what I had written. And that is what, so because my 8th grade teacher had given me my journal, and so she encouraged the class to write. And she's one of my favorite teachers that I still, we're Facebook friends now. And so I was really like torn. It's like, okay, well, my 8th grade teacher encouraged me to write, but then my mother punished me for what I had written. So now what do? And so that is how I lost my voice, because I'm like, oh, if I write what I feel, then someone's going to get hurt, and I never want to hurt anybody. I never want to make anybody feel bad. So I'll just keep everything inside and I'll process it on my own. But when you do that, it eats you up inside, because now you have all of these bottled up emotions that you never let out. The people that hurt you or said something or what have you, you never communicated with them. So, and you're the person that's suffering from it. They're not suffering because they went on with their life.
Yeah.
So my last question, and then if you guys have questions for me, this would be the perfect time, but are you open to creating a new story that better serves you? And so that speaks to the last section of the guidebook where it talks about creating a new narrative. And I know you're still working through it, so I'm just asking, are you open to creating a new narrative? Because that's what I had to do for me, and it's been a game changer. And what I mean, well, first of all, do y'all know what I mean by creating a new narrative? Because I'm like, I wonder if people know what I mean by that.
Yeah, can you explain it a little bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say that, I mean like creating a new story. So the story that I know to be true for me is that my mother chose a man over me. She abandoned me when I was young, physically at 15 years old, but emotionally she had checked out of the relationship long before that. And so the story that I always tell, and the one that I even retell to myself, is that my mother abandoned me, she chose a man. When I think of that, when I say that, that is painful, that hurts, that does not feel good. So what happens is that I am just recycling that pain and that emotion and just keeping it inside, versus if I say, if I change this to something that better serves me, now I can communicate it with other people. When I stand on stages and talk about it, it won't hurt as much, because now I'm switching it to something more positive that fuels me, right? So not that the situation didn't happen, because it definitely happened. However, now I'm choosing to say at 15 years old, my mother loved me enough that she gave me a choice. And that choice was either to stay in that toxic environment that she had created, which I don't know if she knew it would be toxic, but that's a whole nother story. Or she gave me the opportunity to go live with my grandmother. That was the best decision that could have ever happened to me. And so in my mind, she loved me so much that she knew that I would make the best choice. And that's why I'm able to sit here today, right? So it's taking that negative story and changing it to something positive so that it better serves you. So that way you're not just feeling that pain over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So the question, are you open to creating a new story that better serves you?
Absolutely.
If so, why?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay. And Anna, that's for you too. And then why? Why are you willing to do that or open to do that?
I think it helps move forward. It puts definitely a positive spin on things, but it also helps you grow. And it's, you share that experience, you acknowledge it, but you're also moving forward and growing from it. And I think that's the reason, why I want to do it and, continue doing the work to get there. Because I can keep telling the same thing over and over and over, but what am I actually, trying to do about it? And how can I'm always big about helping other people.
Yes.
So whether it be myself, my kids, my family, friends that might need it or who want to be helped, I think that's also a key thing for me too.
I agree. Yolanda?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So are you open to creating a new story that better?
Oh, you said, I say yes. Okay. It was why.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, because you don't have to keep reliving that, like you said, that trauma, that pain. It gives you a different outlook on it. And also kind of helps you understand that it wasn't I don't know, maybe I don't know, it just gives you a different maybe perspective of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to keep thinking about the bad things about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to keep dwelling on it. I mean, like,
yeah.
So I mean, yeah, if you could turn a negative into a positive, I mean, it'll help you.
Mm-hmm. I think also what helped me too was kind of look at it from my mother's perspective. And the only
I was just about to say that, yeah.
The only way I was able to do that is with my coach, because Lord knows I would have never got to this. I can't say that I would have never. I don't know if I would have got to this point so quickly or even thought of it as a way of thinking. But seeing it from her perspective, I mean, she was the baby of the family and she's always been treated like the baby. And she was like, my grandmother was a single mom raising 4 girls on her own. And so with her being the baby and having a mental illness that wasn't identified or acknowledged until several years ago. And then also when she was born with, I don't know what they call this, but one foot was a size 6 and then one was a size 8. So there was a physical disability there. And so with all of that, like seeing, and then she's been through a lot, right? So kind of seeing it from her perspective, I'm like, she did the best that she could with what she had. And if I keep telling myself that, then I have to show her a little bit more compassion, because I talked about this a number of times in the videos where none of us are perfect. And I'm flawed too, just like my mother, just like everybody else. And so my thing is, if I can't hold this high expectation of her, because she never was equipped to give me everything that I needed. She never was. And so that helps me have a softer heart, I guess, if you will. I still, again, have things that I have to work through with that, because one of the things that kept coming up from people in my DMs, and I know this to be true as well, is that the acknowledgement or the apology. So what if you never get the apology that you need, right? Or what if your mother never acknowledges what she's done? Will you still be able to heal past that? And some people like, no, I want my apology. But what is it gonna, if she says, I'm sorry today, will that change the situation? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, honestly,
that's what I was trying to say, Siobhan.
Oh, that part right there. Yes,
that's exactly what I was trying to say. You know, I am at that place, like, and to be honest, I've actually even gone as far as like trying to talk to my grandmother to see what my mother's childhood was like, because, you know, in their day and age, and my grandmother's even said this out of her mouth, like they were taught, well, she was taught, I guess, by my great-grandmother, like great-grandmother, you couldn't ask questions and it was what it was, and you didn't talk about what went on. So, you know, I've been asking my grandmother, you know, what was my mother's childhood like, just so I can understand, or like maybe, you know, be more compassionate and see like, okay, maybe this is why she do things the way she do, or, you know, I definitely believe there's something that happened, but what it is, I don't even know. And I definitely know that it has nothing to do with me. Yeah. So I have gotten to the place where I don't take it personal anymore. It still hurts, but at the same time, I'm kind of, I guess, numb to it. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I am kind of numb to it.
And that, yeah, and my grandmother, I've asked her, but it's always, and she's at a place now in her life. My grandmother would be 90 in November. So her memory is not as sharp, but she knows what she wants to share, you know? And it's almost like you can't ask certain things. Like you, even with being a 39-year-old woman, you stay in a child's place, right? And
that's it.
It's still that part. And it's like, well, what happened? And so, and my aunts will share a little bit, but nobody goes into great detail, and I don't know why, but I would love to know, like, what was her childhood like, other than her being a baby and everybody spoiled her, and, you know, okay, but more to it than that. because even with I don't know how her and my father got together. I don't know what that relationship was like. And it's almost like, and we've all heard this saying, what happens in this house stays in this house, and everyone just goes silent. But the thing is, the person that is experiencing the pain is the one that's still hurting from it because they don't have any answers. And I think that's unfair to not say anything. So now I'm left trying to figure this thing out on my own. And so that goes back to my question, like creating a new narrative. Like, if you never get the answers that you desire, what you gonna do with it? Anna says, I'm open to a new narrative so I can get over this pain. And it's your story of surviving it. And I want to break the generational cycle so my children won't have to go through these things. Absolutely. That's it right there. Changing the story so that you can break the generational cycle.
Yeah.
I love that. And that was the last piece of the 3-part podcast series that I did, Breaking Generational Trauma, because it has to stop with someone. Otherwise you'll pass those patterns over to your children. And I just was having a conversation with my husband about this. The beauty in therapy is that, in doing this type of soul healing work, is that you're not passing on your pain to your children, because it's not fair for them to relive it. It's not like, just because you didn't heal from your stuff does not make it okay for them to have to relive your pain because you have not healed from it. Like everyone is in their own story, living their own lives. And so, because it's almost like, I don't want to use it, like, just because you won't deal with your pain, now you're passing that over to your children. So now they still have to deal with it, and then they're going to pass it on. That's just not okay, in my opinion. So that's why we have to do this healing work, even when it's uncomfortable, even when we're triggered, even when you want to cry, you want to shout, whatever, like, you still have to keep moving forward, because you're raising babies, and and not just for them, but even however you're meant to be, like, whatever your purpose here on life, whatever that is to do, like, you want to do it from a healed place. And I'm so grateful that I'm in a space where I feel whole, where I feel healthy enough to even create something like this so that I can help somebody else. And that is, like, beyond, I don't know, it's very rewarding, and then just getting the positive feedback from everyone that has started working through it and watching the videos and all that jazz, and even listening to the podcast. Like, that's a step. That's acknowledging that I need to do something, right? So that makes me also happy. Does anyone have any questions for me? Because I'm like, I can talk all day, but I'm like, it's 9 o'clock and y'all like, girl, I got to go to work in the morning or whatever. But do you have any questions for me or anything that came up, whether through working through the guidebook or watching the videos or the podcast or anything related to this topic? Does anyone have any questions?
I think we covered a lot. I mean, this was really great. I love the book recommendations, and I have, I think, at least 2 of the books.
Oh, good.
Okay. I have Forgiveness. I know I have that, and I can't remember what the other one was. I know I said, I have these books somewhere, but Forgiveness, I know I have that, and I've read that at least once. So I really like just the whole concept of this, and it's just very rich with material and the videos, and it's very thorough. So that's more of a comment.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I wanted to make sure it had everything that I would have needed when I was going through this. And so I feel like the videos just kind of help explain the content and have additional resources.
Definitely.
And your playlist is bomb, Siobhan, and the affirmations.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you. Y'all making me so happy. I appreciate that. I put a lot of my heart and time into all of this. And I love music. I love music. So I wanted to. And that whole album, Lauryn Hill, the Unplugged album, start to finish is therapeutic. I highly recommend listening to the whole album. I would have put all the songs, but I'm like, Siobhan, just put a couple. They can find it.
I love that Rise Up song too. I really like that song.
Yeah.
So if something comes up afterwards, definitely you can always shoot your questions my way, for sure. Anna, let me know if you have any questions for me. Y'all know how to reach me. And then also, if a question that you want me to ask Dr. Joy, if you think of something overnight, just send it to me tomorrow. Oh, and then if you haven't sent me a testimony yet, that will be amazing. Linda, you did, so thank you.
Yes.
But that'll help me as I'm continuing to promote and get the word out. I have feedback from people who are actually using it, so that will be awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Very good.
So I'm gonna, what I will do is I'm gonna email this video, so then that way y'all have it to look back on. And then you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna add it to the bonus page. So then that way everything will be in one place. So you don't have to go looking through it. So I'm gonna add this video there. And I'll also email to just so you know when it's available. So if y'all don't have any other questions, this was phenomenal. Thank you so much for showing up for me and showing up for yourself. And yeah, y'all know how to find me. And if you have a question, just let me know, Anna. I'll stick on here. But if you ladies want to know, that's totally cool.
Okay, thank you, Siobhan.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
Okay. Nice meeting you.
All
too.
right, thank you. Bye.
Okay.